Greetings, students. All right, so we had our keywords and concepts, kind of boring, I know. But now we're going to get into our content stuff. Yay! All right, so this week, how we're starting our term is we kind of need to know why people decided to leave Europe to come everywhere else before we can talk about all the different folks that showed up here in North America, right? So we're starting this week with European exploration so that we can kind of understand the motivations, why people were coming to the New World, what they were bringing with them, what they were trying to do, all of that. Next week, we're going to learn about our indigenous folks, which you should have just learned that word. We're going to learn about the folks that were here before anybody showed up. So we can kind of start to get an idea of this clash of cultures that is about to take place, right? There's millions of people residing in North and South America, but nobody else knows about them. And the Europeans are getting antsy, right? They want to travel, they want to do things. So we have a video, one of the crash course videos, which I don't love using just because they seem like cheating, but it's really well done. So we're just going to use it for this week. This week's kind of a short week in terms of content. We have a lot to do in terms of getting the class started, and I don't like to overwhelm you guys. So we don't have as much content this week as we normally will. You'll see what it would look like normally next week. But I try to keep the amount of time you have to spend per week about the same. That's kind of the goal here. So we're going to watch our little video on European expansion. And then we get to read some things. Yay! So we're going to talk about the two pieces that we're looking at this week. Like I said, kind of a short week. So we have two pieces. You'll notice you have a treaty, the Treaty of Tordesillas, that's in there. And you have a secondary source on that very same treaty. And you're probably going, what on earth is this? Okay, so things we need to learn this term that's very important. We need to learn what a primary source is. A primary source is a source in history that we use when somebody directly witnessed a thing. That's it. That's all a primary source is. So if you go to a baseball game for the local paper and you watch the whole baseball game and then you write an article on the baseball game, that would be considered a primary source, right? You saw the baseball game, you wrote about the baseball game, and now there is a document talking about the baseball game that you witnessed. Okay? So that would be a primary source. What would be an example of a secondary source? Well, let's say there was a local baseball game and a reporter from the main paper couldn't go. So they sent a local reporter. And the local reporter goes and watches the baseball game, takes notes, and sends those to another reporter. This now becomes a secondary source because the person writing the source material didn't see the baseball game, did they? They just got notes about the baseball game. The notes about the baseball game are the primary source. Now this news article that somebody else is writing, that would be the secondary source. We'll talk more about this as we continue through the term, but a primary source is when a person who witnessed the thing, a person who did the thing, writes the source, is directly responsible for the source. So for this week, our primary source is the Treaty of Tordesillas. This was a treaty signed by two nations through the Pope, because, well, the Catholic Church kind of ran the world back in 1500, so that's what's going on. So we have two documents. We have a primary source document and a secondary source document. Contrary to what you would think, I would like you to start with a secondary source, and this is why. When we have primary source documents that are really old, they can get a little confusing, right? They use weird language, weird conventions, all kinds of bizarre things in there. So sometimes when we're reading really old things, it can be really helpful to read a secondary source first. Somebody who has, like, say, a history degree and has looked at this and understands all the things, right? So I want you to start with our secondary source, which this week is a National Geographic article about the treaty. So that way you'll read the secondary source material, you'll understand what the treaty is before you go to read the treaty. That way you're not coming into it completely blind, going, what on earth is this treaty about, right? So after you've read the secondary source materials, go in and read your primary source materials. Now some tips for reading primary source materials, particularly ones this old. They really liked titles back then. Like, really liked titles back then, there's a half a page of titles in there. You can skip those. I don't care if he was Defender of the Faith or Protector of this or the fifth Earl of whatever. That's fine. We don't need to know about that, right? You can absolutely skip that part. And you can do that in any primary source document. You don't really need to know the 50,000 titles that somebody had for the King of Spain. It's not really relevant to your life. You just need to know what happened in the treaty. All right, so then you'll read the primary source document that actually is the treaty. Now, conveniently, our secondary source document has the map that was drawn from the treaty. So you can actually see what this did to the world and how it kind of created our modern world. So that's fun. So this is our first little investigative piece of history where we're actually looking into history, we're reading the treaty, and we're seeing what happened. All right, so we're going to read all of that. We're going to watch the videos, and then we do have a quiz this week, as always. We have a quiz this week, 10 questions. Half the questions are about the video and reading, and half the questions are about the class. So they're pretty representative of what we've covered this week. And then after you do your quiz, go ahead and pop over to the discussion board post. It's not super intense this week. Again, we're just getting started. I kind of want to get to know everybody. So just pop over to the discussion board post, finish your discussion board post, and then once you've turned in your quiz and discussion board post for the week, you are done. All right, I will see you in the next video, guys.